Thank you so much. So thanks as always to Andrea for all of her work facilitating this for us. Thank you so much, Andrea. And to Bob, who acts as our door person. And to everyone here for your presence. So taking a moment and just enjoying being here together. Seeing what happens in your body as you just relax into that a little bit. There's nowhere to go now. Just be here. Just see what happens as you settle into the body and sense the community. Is there any little settling or letting go? Letting go of any kind of striving or trying hard or kind of being on, and letting go into any sense of release or softness. We're going to sense into tonight to the wisdom of letting go, sensing what that means and what that feels like as a part of our exploration of wise view and wisdom. And so I'm going to bring a little bit of this awareness, a little bit of our awareness to just gently inquire into letting go in the meditation. And so sensing into a sense of your body sitting. And as you bring your awareness into the body, sense it sitting on the chair. Is there any sense of calming, of settling, of any sense of as you sense into the body, any sense of even a quiet, even a small, tiny little bit of settling in the shoulders, relaxing, any sense of a little tiny bit of ease. Just even a little glimpse. And then sensing into our refuges, the refuge of the Buddha, just remembering that the teaching is really inside our heart. The sensing into that. And just being curious if that brings any sense of relief in the body, any small, tiny sense of gathering or loosening. And sensing into the sense of the teachings, the refuge of the teachings, these teachings that we have the fortune of hearing. And sensing into that, and then sensing in any response in the body or the heart or the mind to reflecting that we have these teachings. And sensing into the community here. And just letting the heart soften with the community, feeling the support. And then bringing our attention to the body. Sometimes when we feel back into the body, like we're doing just now, sometimes we can sense a little bit of tightening that had occurred in the body while we were paying attention elsewhere, or a bit of contraction. And if that's there as you bring the attention back, just notice what happens to it when you notice it. Sometimes it can release or dissipate as we notice it, and the body can relax a little bit. And then sometimes the urgency or striving or contraction in the body stays, but we can hold it with our mindfulness, which is not so urgent. The mindfulness can be open and soft, even when the body might be contracted. Just being relaxed about any tightness or striving or urgency in the body. And sensing the body sitting, the feet on the floor, hips contacting the chair, and sensing the breath in the body, filling the lungs, expanding the chest and the belly, the sides of the body, the back, the shoulders moving a little bit. Being relaxed to this ebb and flow of the breath and the ebb and flow of the thoughts as the attention is pulled into thoughts and then comes back. Just being as relaxed as possible about that ebb and flow. And every so often, just checking in. Is there any tightness or contraction or urgency or striving in the body? And noticing what happens as you notice that. And if there is no striving, what's there instead? Is there a sense of peace or ease? And really notice that, experience that fully. And then when it feels right, let the attention return to the body and the breath as your anchor. And just checking in from time to time. Is there striving or urgency in the body or not? What happens as you notice either one? And then resting back into the body and the breath. Hmm. So good to be here with you. Thank you for your practice. And if you wish to take a little look around in gallery view and just enjoy being here with the community, feel free to do that. It's so nice to sense appreciation for the kindred hearts here and just feel that appreciation in the heart. Really experience that and know that your presence is appreciated, and really receive that in. Hmm. And so, friends, we've been talking about the Eightfold Path for about a year now. And the last couple of months, talking about wisdom. The wisdom being the capacity, the growing capacity in our hearts to move towards peace and liberation, and to know how to move or when to move away from agitation. Not with aversion, but with skillfulness. And the Eightfold Path supports this, because the first piece of the Eightfold Path that we explored is the path of ethical conduct. And as we cultivate a sense of our good, our ethical conduct, even if we've had things in the past that we wish we'd done differently, as we start to cultivate this present sense, little topsoil of contentment with our ethical behavior, that can settle the mind and the heart. As we settle the mind and the heart, we can cultivate our mindfulness and see clearly our internal and external experience. And then with that capacity, then we can begin to see more clearly the path of wisdom, the path of peace. And that's where we are now in the Eightfold Path, in the wisdom part. And this wisdom piece is often described as wise view. This view, this understanding of how to identify peace and move towards it. And so that's what I want to talk about tonight, this wise view and how we can really live it. And one of the times I remember really feeling this teaching very deeply was on a retreat with Michael Saborski here in Saskatoon a few years ago. And he said, he's a teacher in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, and he was giving us lunch instructions, how to go for mindful eating meditation. And he's invited us all to feel into our bodies and see if there was any sense of urgency or leaning forward, anticipating, expecting, or any sense of wanting to be in a different moment than we were in at that moment, leaning into. And he just said, feel that in the body. What's it feel like? And then he said, now we can go eat as free people. And that moved me greatly. So simple, so direct, so concrete. And I could feel in my body during his invitation that simply sensing into the leaning forward, the slight leaning forward I had for lunch, as I sensed that, the body just kind of leaned back. And there was a sense of greater ease and a sense of being able to go and eat as a free person. Free from that clinging, that attachment, that urgency, that agenda, that aversion to the moment, all synonyms for what we shorthand often call in the practice clinging. Clinging to something happen, something particular to happen, or aversion to what's here. And so there are three important skills involved in that little exercise that Michael invited us into. First is the capacity to check in. So just check into your body right now, just checking in, what's happening. That's just to check in. See, just see what's happening. And the second skill is asking directly, is there any urgency, agitation, tightness, contraction, clinging, leaning forward here now, without any judgment? And then the third is to notice what happens when you check in like that and ask about any agitation. What happens to it? Does it ease? Sometimes it eases. And if it does, experience that ease. What is that like? It could be very subtle. What is that like? And then if there's an agitation there and it stays there, is there a way of holding that with a mindfulness that is not urgent? Oh, okay, there's some striving here, there's some tightness here. I'm gonna be relaxed about that and just let it be. And is there any sense of release or relief in that? And so these 3 steps are to check in, inquire if there's any of this urgency, leaning in, leaning away from what's happening in the moment. And so the first step, the task we have in that step is the task to simply know what's happening here. The second task, when we notice if there's any clinging, attachment, urgency, is to let it go. And we can let it go in a couple of ways. We can just, first of all, let it be just as it is. That's a letting go of it needing to be different. Or we might notice that we can, just as we notice it, it kind of eases a little bit. And then the third step is to notice if there is a little letting go, or if we can hold what's here with a little bit of ease, then to experience that ease fully. And if the situation is quite intense and there's no easing, then we can move to something that's more pleasant and see if there's an ease there. And so these 3 steps are involved, these 3 skills, these 3 reflections. And this reflection on food reminds me of Richard Shankman. He often talks about chocolate. He loves chocolate. But he says for him, there's no urgency or tightness around chocolate. He can sense into chocolate, see it on the table there, and not have an urgency, because he says he doesn't expect chocolate to do something chocolate can't do. He does not expect chocolate to give him lasting happiness. He does not expect chocolate to be a source of lasting satisfaction. He does not have an agenda for chocolate. He does not have an attachment to chocolate providing those things. So chocolate gets to be just chocolate. And he can enjoy it, and then it's gone, and no suffering, no struggle, no agitation around chocolate. And so we can have this sense of freedom, even around chocolate. And so sometimes this happens in a blink of an eye. We know these 3 steps. We know this in our own experience. We've all had this experience. If I had the chance to talk to each of you, we would be able to come to a time when you experience these 3 things. And sometimes very often they happen just like that, just like very quickly, just like a blink of an eye. Suddenly there's could be just the moment of looking at the sunset, a moment of looking out. Nature's a big one that can help us ease, help us let go of the urgency. So we know this this experience. And then sometimes it happens slowly. Or these little moments can happen, and then over time they add up to something bigger. And for me, one of these experiences is my tendency, and you might have, maybe you've got this pattern or have had it. I wouldn't assume that you do, but I have had a pattern of wanting to tell people what to do. I don't know if you ever have that. I have sometimes think I know what's best, and now I got a hand or two. It's normal. So what I've noticed over time is that I can notice a little agitation, a little, and then I can notice, oh yeah, that's the check-in. Something's going on. And then I can bring in step number two. Is there an attachment? Is there an urgency? Is there like, I got to tell this. I have to tell my physiotherapist, the one that worked for me. I know how to fix that. You should do, try this book. Try. No. So no, if they ask for help, that's different. But noticing the urgency, and if there's a clinging, an attachment, wanting them to do it a certain way. And then if I let go of that, what happens? And there can be a little settling back there, I've noticed. It's like, I don't have to fix it. I'm not in control. I'm watchful for whether my friend asks for advice. And sometimes I say, do you want to know whatever I can ask those things? Not that I'm going to abandon them. But I've noticed over time that can strengthen my relationships, strengthen my peace and ease as well. And so the little moment of release there gradually over time builds so that there's a more of a friend the other day said, an aquifer of peace and ease that can be tapped into. And so this dynamic of checking in, seeing if there's any clanging or urgency or agitation in the body, and we did this in the meditation. I'd be curious, just sense in when you checked in during the meditation. I often in the middle of a meditation the mind will come back from thinking, and then I'll notice, oh, there's agitation in the body. That agitation might have come from what I was thinking about or what the mind was thinking about, or the agitation might have come from the judgment I had, the judgment that rose when the mind came back. That can cause agitation in the body, but often there's agitation and tightness when the mind comes back from thinking. And I noticed that when I notice that, it eases. And so you might have noticed that. That's a very wonderful place to learn about this agitation, urgency, and how it can release. But this 3-step process, checking in, noticing if there's any urgency, striving, tension, tightness, contraction, leaning in, attachment, agenda, and then noticing if we can let that go, either by letting it go directly or holding it with a letting go. And then the 3rd step, noticing any kind of release or relief, experiencing that in the body. These 3 steps are what's known the first 3 of the 4 Noble Truths, the first 3 Noble Truths of the 4 Noble Truths. And this is the overall map, I would say the overall map of the liberation of the mind and the heart. We've talked about other maps the last few weeks, and some more detailed maps of how the mind and the heart can calm, become equanimous, see clearly, and release. Release the agitation or release the clinging. And this is the overall map. Checking in, asking directly, is there any clinging, agitation, urgency? Seeing if it can be let it go, and then noticing experiencing the release, any release afterwards. And so this is important to know, that this is a process that we all know and is the heart, the fundamental liberation practice that we know as the 4 Noble Truths. The 4th Noble Truth is that there are lots of ways to cultivate the mind and heart's capacity to do the first 3. And the way of cultivating our capacity to do the first 3 is, most famously, the Eightfold Path. And so again, we sense into the ethical dimension of our conduct that can settle the mind. That can help us cultivate the mindfulness and concentration skills that can help us see clearly. Oh, there's clinging. Oh, there's ease and peace. And then the wisdom piece is understanding the dynamic and how it works. So we can bring our mindfulness into service of liberation. And so the Four Noble Truths is understood in shorthand as wise view. And unwise view is continuing on in the urgency, continuing on in the grasping. I notice lately that when I go out, maybe because it's such a conscious thing now to go out on an errand list, an errand trip. It's such an intentional act now. When I go out on that activity with the time urgency or with way too many things on the list, then I get into urgency and striving, and I got to get this done fast. That mindset takes over. Does anybody know that mindset? When you're out doing something and you just kind of get into that striving and you think your life depends on getting that to-do list done, that's unwise view. Wise view is recognizing, oh, there's some striving here. Can I let go of it? Or just even noticing. See, there's a letting go just in the noticing. As my body did this, as I was describing it to you, and then I just felt into it, there was a natural letting go. There can be a natural letting go. But then we can learn about what conditions support my capacity to do the to-do list with ease and peace. What supports that? And that's wise view. What supports the capacity of the mind and heart to be in that activity without urgency, clinging, striving, attachment to the outcome. And so how do we live this fully, this promise of liberation, this invitation to the wisdom of letting go? One of the very first things we can do is start to be more intentional, more conscious around the third step. So when we notice any kind of release or relief or letting go of, and then the subsequent sense in the body's our barometer, but also the heart and the mind, to spend as much time with that as we did with the agitation. Often we get wound up in the agitation and it becomes center stage. And when we kind of finally find a key to release a little bit of it, we need to spend time right there. Let the system get a taste for the release. Let a system get a taste for that relief. Soak it up. Let it permeate the body. So that's one thing. And then also we can just begin to bring this into our lives in all kinds of areas. So I have 3 examples I want to share with you. One is an internal example, one is an example in relationship with others, and then one is in relationship to the world. And so this first one is from Oren J. Sofer, who's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful teacher. He teaches in the insight meditation tradition and also in nonviolent communication, which is the short form we say for that, NVC, nonviolent communication. And these 2 approaches have really formed a wonderful marriage in the insight meditation world, because NVC offers very concrete tools for our ethical conduct in the world, wise speech and other ethical conduct. And so Oren teaches in both those approaches together. And this is what he says. He's going to talk here about an internal relationship and how he brings the 3 steps to it. So he says, I spent years feeling like I'm not enough, thinking that I don't have enough, or believing that I needed what someone else has to be happy. That's clinging. Our culture points to surface things like the latest device or stylish clothing. The deeper envies, though, are what really hurt, wanting someone else's life, their career, their relationship, their intelligence, or good looks. It's so tragic, the loss of love for myself that's wrapped up in wanting to be someone else. Envy robs us of contentment. We are left trying to fill an empty hole or avoid the pain of feeling incomplete. Whenever this happens, I've learned instead to slow down. That's the first step, checking in. When this is happening and it starts to cycle, he tunes in, checks in, slows down, and then makes space. Here comes the second step, makes space for how I'm feeling, to be with the ache in my heart. That's being with that 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 ache, that sense of what's present there, without clinging, without wanting it to be different, without an attachment that the ache go away. So there's the second step. He's let that go. When I can do this, when I can turn my attention to appreciate what's already present, when he can just be here, that joy of being present with what's here, then he said, I feel a deeper wholeness, and remember that what I have and who I am is enough right here and right now. And so he fully experiences that. That's the third step, really fully experiencing that sense of enoughness. And so his invitation for us into this process in this way is to reflect on, what is it that you feel grateful for right now? And then experience that. Experience that. And so when we feel this, then this gratitude is a wholesome sense of being in the present moment, a wholesome sense of gladness for what's here. It's very helpful to be able to differentiate between that wholesome happiness, that sense of being here and now, and what the Buddha would also call a wholesome desire, a wholesome wanting. These are wholesome states. A wholesome desire for peace, a wholesome wish for gratitude, and attachment or clinging. And so we want to distinguish between these two. This is where our mindfulness comes in, our cultivation of wise discernment, getting to know these two. And I really like what Mickey Cashton says about this, the way she describes it. Mickey is another NVC teacher, trainer, wonderful teacher and trainer. And also she just recognizes the marriage between insight meditation and NVC. So she says, wanting, I believe, is the core energy that makes life happen. She's talking about wanting in a wholesome way, the wholesome desire. Wanting is the core energy that makes life happen. And the Buddha's teachings are right in alignment with this, that it's that wholesome desire that keeps us going on the path. She says, in my work with people, the surest way to rekindle aliveness and a sense of meaning in life is to reconnect with passion. Reconnect with any passion, any sense of what you love. She says, attachment, on the other hand, is the attempt to make life be a certain way. It makes us lose our openness to life, our creative and imaginative energy, the capacity to dance with what life presents without losing track of what we want in a wholesome way, and our capacity to embrace the fullness of our experience, even when it's not what we want. And so how do we know the difference? We all know this difference in our body. The body's our barometer. And it's really important to know the attachment feel, that's the second noble truth, and the wholesome sense of release, relief, non-urgency, non-striving. That's the third noble truth. And Mickey goes on to say, there is a kind of wanting that is contracting and grasping and is about coming to take something from life. And there is a kind of wanting that is expansive and is about coming forward to meet life. Isn't that a nice way of differentiating between those two? One wants to take from life, one's coming forward to meet life. And shifting from the former to the latter, she says, is what makes it possible to stay comfortably in the wanting. When we let wanting be, we can experience ourselves as more alive, regardless of the outcome. So here is an example from Mickey of how we can bring this into our relationships with others. This sense of the difference between moving from attachment, clinging, agenda, and moving from the sense of wholesome, resting in the wholesome that we may desire in a wholesome way. And the NVC talks about this, the Buddhist language may talk about this as wholesome desire, wholesome states, and NVC language, they talk a lot about wholesome needs, are the beauty of our needs for peace, connection, ease. So Mickey says the attachment often shows up in the form of a should. For example, in talking about her struggle with her ex-husband, a workshop participant said, "He's not spending as much time with my daughter as he should." As long as she holds a should, she will remain contracted, and her ex-husband will continue to pick up the demand energy and resist being with the daughter. The woman had little difficulty identifying the need or wholesome desire at the heart of her struggle. It was love. However, she had immense difficulty staying with the need and simply connecting with the movement in her heart. Instead, she kept being pulled into the idea that her ex-husband should spend more time with their daughter. Anybody besides me feel the pull into shoulds around other people, around ourselves, and how hard it is to bring our mind out of that vortex. So it's, that's the way that we've got a lot of pull on that pattern. So we can let go of judgment towards ourselves. So what this person did, she put in a lot of effort. With effort, she was able to let go of the notions surrounding the should and simply be with her need for love, regardless of what was or was not going to happen. Once she was able to do that, the tension, her tension released, and she experienced immense relief. And so we can see how this can relate to in relationships with other people. We're clinging, we're attached to something particular happening. And if we can rest into what may be the wholesome wish, the wholesome need under that, then we can rest in a letting go of that clinging. It's a practice. But having the map is helpful. And so I want to close with end with a third example, and this is just in the world at large. How do we release our attachment when our passion for the world may revolve or may be connected with social justice, may be connected with the environment, may be connected with peace in the world? How do we let go of attachment there? What can happen often in this case, the challenge can often rise, be the tension between what it is we want in a wholesome way and what it is we think is possible. And this is where we get attached to the outcome. And often in the face of not knowing the outcome or being attached to an outcome that we don't know, there's two ways we often respond. One is by trying to force it and manipulate things, push ourselves for an agenda, rest our happiness on achieving a certain aim, or we give up. And so Buddhism and NVC also walk a path that's not forcing and it's not giving up. It's being fully in our wholesome desire, being able to really live in that in the midst of and letting go of the clinging to the outcome. And we've got great examples all around us right now. Of course, we've got this rising awareness of racism in the world. It's really rising, the awareness. And Yet we know we can't fix it. I was on a call the other day with a man, with many meditators from around the world, and there was a man there from India, and he said, I live in a country," he said, "that has racism, discrimination, prejudice built into the caste system. It's been that way for thousands of years, and I don't see it changing." It was something to hear that, but it's the truth. From his perspective, that was, and so we said, what can we do? And he said, from my perspective, and he's in the midst of terrible difficulty. In my perspective, he said, what we can do is work with our family, our friends, and our community and let go of the outcome. And in doing that, we can live in the desire for love and peace and justice as we work, as we let go of the burden of having to fix everything. So we're doing this in SIMC. We're going to hear more about that, an announcement at the end of the time tonight. But we're going to move into this particular area this fall with 3 programs. And mindfulness has been identified as key in addressing anti-racist work, and really working with anti-racist work in a couple of ways. One, in helping Indigenous people and people of color work with and let go of the trauma of racism, and also working with European or white folks who also have a trauma included in racism. Helping that community let go of that trauma. And so we're going to have programs in both these areas, and as well a retreat for everybody to come together in. We'll hear more about that. But this is my external example of how we can live in the midst of things, letting go of our attachment and our leaning into it has to be fixed, and live right here in the midst of our deepest wish for peace and justice. Live it as fully as we can. And so these 3 steps, just to summarize the first 3 noble truths: checking in, what's happening right now? Secondly, is there any clinging or attachment in this situation that's causing some struggle? Can we let it go? And thirdly, if there is any release, knowing that fully. These steps are the steps of the 4 noble truths: to know what's happening, abandon or let go of attachment as best we can, and then experience the release. And then as we do that, then we can move into wise action more fully. And so let's just go back to Michael's invitation to eat as a free person. We can bring that invitation into any moment. Sense your body right now. What's happening? As I sensed into my body, I noticed some tightness. If you notice that, notice what happens to it. That's the clinging that just shows up automatically. We don't even often have to ask about it. It just shows up, that tightness, urgency. See what happens in your body if it was there, and noticing it, what happens. And for me, that it released, and then there was a sense of ease, small, quick like an instant, but there. And the more we notice it, the more we can rest in the release of it. If you felt into your body just now and there was tightness and it stayed, can you hold that with the spaciousness of mindfulness? Hold that with the letting go. And if you tuned in and there was ease and release, simply experience that. Simply, fully know that. So I'm going to close with a poem. Oh, I just want to say one more thing. This letting go is really a letting go of our sense of control, in a way, our sense of having to control, and our sense of self, in a way, our sense of this. There is a self here that has to do something. That's the clinging piece. We're clinging to, and when we release, there's a release of that sense of the self having to do something. Things carry on, life carries on, but the sense of self is a little bit looser. The sense of that self that has to fix control. That's a little momentary glimpse into a loosening of that sense of self that can get so tight. And so I'm going to close with a poem from the Therigatha, the elder nuns. And this is a poem called from Mutta, and her name means free. One morning after begging for my food, looking down at one more meal I hadn't worked for, hadn't paid for, hadn't earned, a life of debts I could never repay, pushing in on all sides like the weight of the sea. I blinked, and a tear fell into my bowl. Would it always feel like this? Just as the moon rises up from the bottom of the sea, a handful of rice lifted itself from the bottom of my bowl, and my heart rose with it. I wish I could tell you how it tasted, that first bite of food as a free woman. Thank you so much. Let's let the words settle for a moment or two. When we're caught in clinging, the question rises, will it always feel like this? It does, doesn't it? And then if we stay with the practice, work with what we know, there can be a moment where we can abandon, let go of that. And then to abandon that little sense of tight self a little bit, then the handful of rice can lift itself from the bottom of the bowl. There's no us doing it. Just as the moon rises up from the bottom of the sea, a handful of rice lifted itself from the bottom of my bowl, and my heart rose with it. I wish I could tell you how it tasted, that first bite of food as a free woman. Let's dedicate the merit of our practice, this beautiful practice that we have cultivated together. And if you wish to go on gallery view now, feel free. We can dedicate this all together. Dedicate just from the goodness of our hearts, dedicate this practice that we have offered each other, really. Each heart here offering this to each other heart. Let's gather all our hearts together and send this out to all beings. May all beings benefit from our practice tonight. May our practice tonight be a cause for the liberation and the peace and the ease in the hearts of all beings. Thank you, everybody.